And you mentioned just now organic and biodynamic production, which is something I've noticed across Champagne as a rising trend. Is it just a fashionable trend, or do you think it really impacts the end result? Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. Well, the first thing to say is you do hear people say that it's growing in Champagne. It is, but it's a very small percentage of the vineyards of Champagne that are moving in this direction. And there's a whole range of historical and wine style reasons why it's been particularly slow to happen in Champagne. Also supply and demand is a feature. When you're aiming, when you can't make enough wine to supply the market, then obviously working organically, which tends to mean working with lower yields, becomes a problem because you need to make a sacrifice commercially. But to talk to the idea of the connection between organics and biodynamics and quality, there is a definite connection. But of course, you need to define quality. But in general, or in simple terms, I mean, we can just talk about organics because biodynamics is a form of organics, if you like. I mean, I kid my biodynamic friends that biodynamics is just organics with a bit of religion thrown in. But it's a little bit more than that, of course. But it's nonetheless a type of organic. So when we think about quality wine or striving for quality wine, we are talking about, first of all, the health of a vine, because you need a healthy, balanced vine in order to produce the best quality fruit. And we're also talking about, if we're talking about the great wines of Europe, we're talking about expression of place. So, and for me, in general, I think that's one of the elements that we need to incorporate when we talk about quality. It's always been part of wine, this association between, where a wine comes from and how it tastes, both from a quality and a stylistic perspective. We want wines that are unique because they're grown in unique places. That's what makes wine interesting. So if we're talking about those two elements, we realise very quickly, once we know something about the biology and the evolution of the vine, that soil health or life in the soil becomes very important because the biota in the soil breaks down the nutrients and the minerals that the vine takes up through its roots, and this is a very important function. And in fact, we know that there's a very strong symbiosis between much of the biota in the soil and the vine roots. And they also retain a lot of water. This biota, these bacteria and fungal critters that live in the soil hold water for the vine to take up as well. So they perform a number of functions. So they're key to vine health. They're also key to the vine expressing its place, because obviously if a vine can't extract nutrients and minerals from its soil, then you've kind of broken the connection between the vine and the soil. And it turns out that a lot of the conventional practices that came into viticulture, in particular in the 70s, but even started in the 60s, post World War II, effectively, the use of herbicides, pesticides, heavy machinery that compacts the soil, chemical fertilisers, and so on. These practices, as it turns out, diminish life in the soil. They impact the life in the soil negatively. If you think of something like herbicide, which is the most obvious example, it doesn't only kill a lot of plants in the soil, which obviously impacts place or the nutrients that will pass through the soil profile. It also kills a lot of the microbial life in the soil. So it directly severs, if you like, or strongly limits the vine's ability to function in a healthy environment, but also extract nutrients and minerals from the soil and therefore express its place. Because that's the genius of the Vitis vinifera vines that we work with today, is that they are acutely sensitive to changes in their environment, which is why they make unique wines, when you plant them in different places. And that's a key part of that process that's going on. So all organics is, for a European grower, anyway, is a return to the traditional practices, or a return to the logic of traditional practices before chemicals came in. And it was through that process, really, in the 70s that growers became aware, as these more industrial, conventional, what we call conventional practice today arose, the use of chemicals and heavy machinery, that growers and wine buyers saw, an equivalent drop-off in quality. And if you go back to the 70s and try and buy outstanding wines from the 70s from great French wine regions, it's actually very difficult. And that's because the practices became very industrial. And the move back to organics was simply a function of the realisation of a lot of top growers in France that these practices diminish quality. So they look back to what their grandfathers had done, sometimes what their fathers had done before the changes, and started exploring that path. And that's really all the organics movement was. We had to have a name for it because it was an alternative to the conventional practice that had become dominant. So yes, that's quite a rather long-winded answer. I'm sorry, but organics is fundamentally linked to quality, but it's only one element. The quality of the vineyard, the potential of the vineyard, the way the vineyard was planted, the plant material, all the choices made through the establishment of the vineyard and also through the season and in the cellar. All these things have significant roles to play in terms of the final quality of the wine. But organics or the encouragement of life in the soil is pruning. I didn't mention pruning, but encouragement of life in the soil is vital if you're really striving for the highest possible quality.
Yeah. That's a really fascinating subject.